Hello, everybody, to this week's developer session. We don't have a big agenda or no big topic for this call, mainly also because some of the developers cannot join, like Christoph. And Greg, I think, still has health issues with his back, so he also cannot join. Luckily, Oscar could join today. Maybe Bernard will join as well. But yeah, we keep it a little bit more open. Whatever you would like to discuss, we can handle and cover as well. I have a small agenda, as you have probably seen. Would like to cover a little bit the release, and there are a few important changes and a few important fixes, small stuff maybe, but good to know for everybody, I think. Then I briefly discussed with Florian about options, how we could add integration tests for multiple operating systems to our build system. Maybe we can just brainstorm a little bit in this direction, but that would be good when Bernard would be here, and maybe we cover it more in depth when Bernard is available as well. Related to this release, pull requests, something about logging, at least something what I was not really aware of, and which is important to know, I think, for every developer. And when we still have time, I would like to to push out an idea for how we can improve altcoin trading. And maybe some developer who is not super occupied at the moment already with the topic, maybe like Thomas could try to have a look to this and make a proposal about this and so on. But let's keep this at the end if there's still enough time. So I make a screen sharing with the pull requests so we can have a look together over what has been added to this release, and I'll give a quick overview and background about the different topics. I'll make the screen sharing, 1 second. Do you see my screen?
Yes. Yes, we do.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's the closed pull requests. I think there is no pull request open, which is planned to get in for the release. So, by the way, we plan to have a new release either maybe today in the best. No, probably not today anymore. Probably tomorrow. And the main reason why we wanted to get out this release was because I found a solution to solve this problem with not being able to spend unconfirmed change outputs from BSQ, which is a usability drawback. So when you made a BSQ transaction and you had only one UTXO where all your BSQ were sitting, then you have to wait for one blockchain confirmation, because BSQ is only verified when a block is created. We are not verifying unconfirmed transactions. And when you want to create multiple proposals, for instance, you have to wait until the next block and so on. And especially for traders, it would be very bad when they want to use BSQ for paying the trading fee. And when you create one trade, then in the worst case, you have to wait for another block until your UTXO is confirmed and you can spend it again. It would depend on your UTXO set. So when you have many UTXOs, then it's likely that you have other remaining UTXOs which you could use. But it's confusing for the user. Sometimes he could do it, sometimes not. So it was a high priority to find a solution to make it possible to spend your own change outputs, because that basically has no risk. You are not trying to cheat yourself with creating invalid BSQ transactions. So it can be considered as safe. I mean, when there would be, because of a bug or whatever, an invalid transaction, all this follow-up transaction will become invalid BSQ transactions as well. And so for the system, it doesn't create a problem. From usability, of course, it could then screw up quite a little bit, but that is not expected. We don't allow spending UTXOs which are unconfirmed, which you have received. So when I send you some BSQ, then you cannot spend this BSQ before a blockchain confirmation. So we have not changed that. And yeah, that was the main reason for this quick release. We had a big release just 2 weeks ago. And usually we try to stick with a 1 month cycle for new releases. But we thought for DAO testing, it's a big improvement, and it's probably confusing for people who are not so familiar yet with the Bisq DAO to understand the reasons why it is the case. And so that was the goal. Over the last days, I got in touch with a power trader, a Monero trader, who gave me very interesting feedback. He traded really a lot, and he had unfortunately quite a lot of cases of failed take offer attempts. So when he tried to take an offer, he got a timeout and lost the trading fees. And it was roughly 10% of all his trades have been failed. And I mean, we have this reimbursement, so those users can ask for reimbursement on GitHub support repository. But it also, I think in the last 1 or 2 months, it was something like 10% of our revenue, which ended up in reimbursement for reimbursing people. So it became really a problem over the last months. And the reason why this happens is not 100% clear yet. I suspect that it's standby behavior on different operating systems, and probably also on different type or environment. So when you are running on a laptop, standby behavior might behave different, like when you run it on the same operating system but on a desktop computer. At least I know it from OS X that it has changed over the last years, how the operating system handles standby. And in the more recent operating systems in OS X, you cannot prevent that your application gets throttled down the network resources. Whatever you define in your preferences, it doesn't matter. So after a while, the network resources get very low. And that leads to the bad situation that your offer still managed to get republished. So it's visible in the offer book. Then some taker try to take this offer. And in the take offer process where you're exchanging the messages with the peer, your network resource is too low to respond in time. And the other peer get the timeout and lose the trading fee. For OS X, we seem to have fixed this by playing a inaudible sound, so very silent sound, is played in the background, and that prevents the operating system to cut off your resources or to apply standby mode to your application. At least it seems that on OS X that works, and it was tested, I think it was with the 0.9 release introduced. And we have seen that we had less such cases, but it seems that most of our users are Windows users at the end. And it seems that we still have issues from these other operating systems. From this particular user, I know that he was a Windows user. And yeah, we need to investigate. Devin started a little bit to investigate this issue. We couldn't reproduce it so far, but I assume it behaves different on your device. So when you run it from a laptop, I can assume that for saving energy, the operating system behaves different when the system is in standby mode. So we need to go on to investigate, to find solutions for this. One possible solution would be to make sure that your offers get removed. So when you don't have sufficient network resources, then you remove your offer. Yeah, we have to discuss what's the best strategy, how to deal with it. But so the underlying problem still is not solved. But because we probably cannot solve this soon and quickly, I tried another solution, which is that we are delaying the broadcasting of this taker fee transaction just to the time before the taker is publishing the deposit transaction. So in the trade protocol, like it was before, the taker fee transaction was published, then the taker sent a message to the maker. The maker is sending a message back, and then the taker is publishing the deposit transaction. And when he never heard back from the maker, as in this last message, when this was missing, then he got the timeout and the taker fee was already paid. There was some reason for this, for basically as a protection against data harvesting, because in this last message, the maker is exposing his payment account data to the peer. And for fiat trades, that is a problem for when some whatever chain analysis companies want to spy on BISC users. They could basically try to take all offers and then fail in the last moment. And by publishing the taker fee transaction early, we tried to we tried to add some costs to this. So when somebody wants to do this, it becomes expensive. At least it's not a very strong protection, and it at the end we also never managed to really make the verification on the maker side to only send the data when the fee is published. It would be problematic also because it's not we cannot wait until a confirmation, so it's a pending transaction, and there's no guarantee that the maker will see the transaction in the network. So basically, we need to find a better conceptual solution as protection against this potential threat. And at the moment, it was just causing more risk that in such cases when the maker do not respond in time with the last message, that the taker lost the fee. And I just delayed it now, so the transaction is not committed to the wallet and not broadcast until the last moment, just before the deposit transaction is created. And with that, basically, this problem with lost taker fees should go down to zero, I assume. There is still a tiny potential that in this last moment, there are two different tasks in the trade protocol, and when, for whatever reason, it would fail to publish the deposit transaction, then it would still be a problem, but there is no reason why this should happen, that maybe 1 in a million times. So that was a very important feature which should increase usability, because of course it's very annoying for users to ask them for reimbursement, and many people don't know it. They just take it in, take the lost fees. Usually it's not really a lot, the trading fee, but it decreases usability a lot, and I'm happy that we could fix this now. So maybe I go over the list. I just pushed another, or we merged another pull request. We had, when I developed mainly for the peer-to-peer network, I added for verifying that all the messages are called, or all the the methods and handlers are called in the right order at the right time. And so I added a trace lock utility function in the static, as in the lock class, the static method there. And that was used a few years ago during development time, and since then I left it just in case, for debugging or whatever. But I never enabled it, as it was only enabled when you put lock level to trace. And Florian did some performance tests with some profiling with peer-to-peer network, and reported me that those are quite expensive calls, because they're not really part of the locking framework and not optimized regarding the locking framework. So I just removed all those. And he told me another important thing, which I was not really aware of, as I was aware that locking frameworks are built in the way when you have not enabled the locking level, like debug, then your debug calls are super cheap and doesn't really cause performance issues. But there is one problem when you use a string concatenation, like my variable and then the quote plus and then the variable, then it gets evaluated by the compiler as a string evaluation. And when this variable, what you're locking, is expensive to create, like we had a lot of where we locked the connection itself, and then it's a connection to string, and the connection is quite a big class, so that's not a very cheap call. Then all that get executed even if you're not on that lock level. So all these trace and debug locks which used the string concatenation with plus, or the variable to string concatenation with plus, were a problem from performance point of view. I fixed this now, and so it should maybe some of you and hopefully most of you already know this. I was not really aware that there is a performance difference between that method and the recommended method is that you use the curly brackets and the comma, and then you can add whatever variables you want to add there, and then the expression doesn't get evaluated by the compiler, and it's only evaluated when you are on the lock level. Florian, do you want to add something here, or maybe make it a little bit more clear, like my bad explanation?
Oh, no, that basically that was correct what you said, and I added some examples to the chat, so I think
okay,
that's good enough.
Great. Yeah. So yeah, basically we should care, and we will take care in the reviews for new pull requests that we don't allow. I mean, I tried to clean up a little bit of the old stuff, but it's still, of course, it's a longer task to clean up all the logging that we are not using, or that we're using the preferred method, and maybe also remove the trace and debug messages. It's because mostly they are not really needed, and just what else then? Added another pull request yesterday for percentage-based values for the security deposit. Some traders complained that it was a fixed amount, so it didn't matter if you trade 20 euro in Bitcoin or if you trade 500 euro in Bitcoin. The security deposit for the buyer was a fixed amount in Bitcoin. The maker can define the security deposit, and the main reason is to avoid kind of option trading or future trading. It's when there is high volatility and when you are the buyer and the price moves against your interest, then you could decide to not send the fiat or the altcoin. And especially with altcoins in high, when the prices are very volatile, we get reported more disputes from arbitrators that some users are abusing this basically, and they prefer to lose the low security deposit instead of continuing the trade and have basically more loss when they continue the trade with the bad price for them, and it's cheaper than for them to make a new trade with a better price. And to avoid this, we give it basically to the maker, that the maker can define. Usually they know how volatile the market is. It's not the perfect solution, and we want still to improve this, that basically the security deposit will be derived from the volatility, from the trade statistics, but that's a little bit, that's another task for another release. And a short solution now was to make it at least percentage based on the trade amount, because if you trade 2 Bitcoin in Monero, or if you trade just a very tiny amount, there should be a different different amount for the security deposit as well. And that's implemented now. We also increased a little bit the default values because it seems that we get too many disputes where people are abusing this. So hopefully with higher security deposits, people stop trying to cheat in a way the trading protocol. It's not really a cheating because it's part of the possibilities, but it's not the intended behavior. When you take an offer, basically you have to fulfill the offer. And this, because we cannot force the buyer to make the payment. Of course, he has the possibility to cancel out in a way, but it should be so expensive for him that usually he's not doing, even if the price moves against his interest. So that should help. Because one of those feedbacks, which was very valuable from this trader, which is a pro trader, I wanted to find out, what are the main issues for pro traders with the current disk implementation, and what can we improve for them to make it more attractive. And one of the main thing was that he said, to have the funds locked in very short time. The longer they have basically their Bitcoin or Monero locked in a trade, the worse it is, because they have only a certain amount of resources what they can have on both currencies to trade. And when 70% of those resources are locked in trades, they cannot go on with trading. And that was the motivation to add another feature, this one with the live trading. Live trading is maybe not really the was struggling with the right term. We call it now instant trading. It's at the moment only for altcoins. So when you create an altcoin account, there is a new checkbox where you can enable instant trading, and with that the trade period is limited to 1 hour. So you have to fulfill, both traders have to fulfill this trade in 1 hour. So only both can trade when both have set up such an account. So you need basically 2 accounts when you sometimes prefer to do fast trading and sometimes the normal trading. And so you cannot mix when you have set up a normal Monero account. You cannot trade with a maker who has created a offer for instant trading. You need to create a new account for this instant trading, and then when you take this offer, you have to ensure that you are physically online and you can fulfill the trade in 1 hour. 1 hour is required. We cannot go much shorter, because especially with Monero, in Monero they have a similar problem that you cannot spend unconfirmed transaction outputs. I think I cannot explain it exactly what's the technical backgrounds and so, but it can easily happen when you're sending some Monero out that you are blocked for a few blocks until your UTXOs are returned to your wallet and spendable, because of you have the ring signatures. So they're in several rounds, and in this time you cannot use them. So in the worst case, it takes half an hour or whatever, what the Monero user has to wait until he can again spend the money. And of course, when they do many live tradings in parallel, they would get to the same problem. They have to be aware how much they can handle, either by using different Monero wallets or whatever, to avoid these problems. What else? I skipped the ones which are not very relevant. There are many smaller pull requests. Florian found, luckily, one very important and long existing memory leak, which was mainly visible only on the seed nodes. I never could see it on normal applications on OS X, or also from users. It was not really reported. In the connection class, there was a tiny, small, stupid missing line, basically, where we were collecting for checking how much messages you are handling. We were collecting those, and when you had when you received too many messages, then you stopped, also when on the receiver side. So when a peer was sending you too many messages, you disconnect him. And when you send out yourself too many messages, you are throttling down and call some sleep on a thread in between. And there was a list which were collecting all these messages over time with timestamps. And this list was not correctly cleaned up when it was hitting a limit. So we were only collecting, I think, 2,000 messages there, and then starting to delete old messages. And there was missing while loop to delete really all messages and not only the last one or the first one. And that should fix basically the main issue on seed nodes, that memory was growing on seed node. We still are in the process to check and verify if it's was the only issue or not, but at least it was for sure one of the major issues. So I'm happy that we could get this solved. There are a few other tiny other improvements in that area, especially also with the locking and some other small improvements in the peer-to-peer networks, which, yeah, so that was another finding with feedback from this use and also from other, a little bit investigation. We have seen that we got a little bit more lost peer-to-peer network messages. Users are reporting that their disputes were not handled also because probably the open dispute message never arrived at the arbitrator, or trade messages didn't arrive. And it's probably caused because the peer-to-peer network get too crowded already. We have many more users like in the past, and the republishing of the offer. So when you have an offer live, every 5 minutes you send a refresh message out to the network, which is a very lightweight message, doesn't contain the full offer, only the minimum data to prove that you are the owner of the offer. And then the time to live, so every offer has a time to live in the peer-to-peer network. So when the maker would lose network connection or kill his application without a planned shutdown, a graceful shutdown, then the offer get removed after the time to live has expired from every peer. And this time to live, I think it was 7 minutes, and the refresh interval was 5 minutes. And it seemed that this 2 minute in between was not enough. Sometimes the refresh message don't arrive at all peers, and then your offer got removed. And we got this report also from this one trader, that he has observed that his own offers was removed, even if he was online and was good connected. But it was probably because the refresh message didn't arrive at all peers. So I changed these parameters for the refresh and for the time to live, increased both the refresh to reduce a little bit the network load, and the time to live to make it less likely that you get in this problem zone that you didn't receive the refresh message in time. I think that probably will not really fix a lot. It should be just a tiny or small improvement. We will look into a better fix by batching those messages. Also, when you as a peer receive hundreds of messages, we have seen that more or less there are 300 refresh offer messages per minute. That's something like 5 messages per second, which is quite a lot. And we will try to find a solution for batching all these messages and pack it to one message, which will be broadcast to the other peers. So you are not sending out then, in the worst case, something like 20 or 100 messages per second, but only one message which contains then all these messages, but you have received in a certain time frame. But that's a little bit more complex, and we'll discuss with Florian how to do this and when we'll be ready. But that should improve a lot this network congestion issues, and should make the peer-to-peer network more reliable again. Then another important feature is in the API branch. As the API branch is still separate from the master, and it's still not ready for production, but I think we're getting closer now, because two important features have been implemented from Bernhard. One is security framework for password protection with a token for the API. So all the calls for the API require a token, and you have to provide your password to the API to receive the token. And then the second one, the connection to the API will be only supported over Tor, hidden services. We were considering also to use HTTPS, but it would have had the problem that you need set up Let's Encrypt to get the certificate, and you can only do this when you have a domain. So many people will run it just with an IP address without the domain, and then you have a problem to get the HTTPS support for this. And HTTPS is also based on a centralized system, basically, so I'm not so super great fan of it. I mean, it would have been good enough. but the main reason was, yeah, there's this limitation that you need a domain and need to set up Let's Encrypt and so. And Tor is solving all these problems and deliver much more features, and only comes with the extra cost that it costs more performance, which is not the problem with the API. We don't have a performance issue there that you are calling your API with 1,000 requests per second or whatever. So he has implemented this, and it's actually quite an interesting way how it's implemented. It doesn't use a socket in Java. It just calls the NetLayer library that it creates a new hidden service, which is only used for the API. So it's completely separate from the normal Bisq application. And it proxies to the port, to the local port of the API. So it doesn't start anything in Java. It doesn't go like our Tor framework, the way how we use it. We are starting a socket, and this socket is basically our local proxy in the application. For the API, not even that happens. So I think from performance point of view, it's very, very cheap. It's really done purely from the Tor binary and proxying a hidden service to the local port. So I think that's quite a cool implementation. And from my point of view, I think the API would be basically ready now for production. I mean, there features which are implemented are not very usable for, I think it's only get version and another trivial feature, but that was intentional to have basically all the basics really in place and solved, and then start to implement the features. But Bernhard is working on this, and maybe in the best case with the next release, we can release publicly the API. I would like to release it, or to have an extra module desktop with API. Also, the API can be run as a headless version, and in the desktop, similar like in Bitcoin Core, you can with the internal terminal, you can use the API and the RPC API even if you run a desktop. So you can run your Bisq application as desktop and have your API server running as well and get connected from the API side as well. But to reduce, because the API it's a different project in a way, and we want to be very very careful with security risks to not expose all Bisq users to potential issues from the API side. I prefer to have two binaries: the normal desktop binary, which doesn't include anything from the API, and the second binary, desktop plus API, where those users who want to take advantage of this feature to have the desktop plus the API in one application, they can install and run this. But if we would find out some security vulnerability, it would be limited to much less users, and the potential damage would be much less critical. It's a little bit of pain because we need to we have an extra application build, so the build takes a little bit long and so on. Maybe we can find some kind like smart solution that by default you are not compiling this extra application only for the release manager who's doing the release. He will then compile this or whatever. We have to discuss when we get closer to this. I'm just looking if there's anything else. Yes, I think we cover probably most of the important features. So I stop the screen sharing here. Do anybody of you have some questions or want to discuss or add something regarding releases and technical stuff, what has happened in the last 2 weeks? If not, then I go on. I started to discuss a little bit with Florian just before the call, possibilities to add integration testing, especially for different operating systems in our build system. So when you make when you make a pull request, it gets tested on Windows, on Linux, on OS 6, and so on automatically. It's for sure not the easy task, and I would postpone this when Bernard is available as well, because he has a lot of experience with integration tests with the API and so. I doubt that Travis in the free version, like we are using it at the moment, will support this, because I think it will consume much more resources. So probably we need to start to run our own integration test server and handle this. I'm not familiar with this at all, but maybe Devin can help in that area if that will be the way to go. Yeah, because the main issue is that most developers only are developing and only have available one operating system. Even if you have, like myself or Christoph, you have some VMs with other operating systems, it's kind of like painful to start this VMs. It's super slow. And at the end, it always behaves a little bit different, especially when you want to test some more complex stuff like the, like at the moment, this issue with the standby mode. I mean, that's, of course, it cannot also be done by integration tests, but it's limited with VM. It's not really the same. And to have a little bit more realistic system would be good. I mean, of course, this integration test will also be limited and not really the real stuff, but at least it will help us to spot potential issues on different operating systems. Luckily, we don't have many issues. I mean, one of the very few have been this issue with the seed node restore problem. It seems that we still have some issues. We got some bug reports, and it seems that the users have used the latest version. I'm not 100% sure yet. I've not investigated closely, but I think we have to look closer and test more in depth if the restore function with seed node really works 100%, especially on Windows, because it's a very critical issue, of course, when a user would have backed his seed node and need it because he has a hard disk crash or whatever, and then it's not working. When it's only not working on Windows and we can get it working on other operating system, it's not terrible problematic, because at least he can recover then with help from somebody else. But it's still, of course, very annoying for the user, and it's bad for the reputation of BISC when such a critical part is not really working 100% safe. Should put this a little bit on our priority. So maybe Oscar, if you have time, maybe you can. I don't want to interrupt your plans at the moment. I know with the Bitcoin J branch and release stuff, I think we should continue and close this. But we can have a private discussion about this. But basically, I think we should put this a little bit in focus, that we are solving this issue. And other issues are with Tor starting.
Yeah, Manfred, please see if you have any lead on a bug on this. Just send it to me so I can have a look.
Yeah, I will assign it on GitHub, and we can have a discussion anyway when you have time in private to talk a little bit about the roadmap and so. Another issue what we have spotted over the last weeks a little bit more, like in the past, from my point of view, is startup issues with Tor. It's either that you cannot get it started at all, and it seems that there are some issues, and I experienced this myself last year, that suddenly I couldn't connect to Tor anymore with different new onion addresses and so on. So it seems that either my internet provider was blocking Tor, or my IP address, which was a static one and I couldn't change, unfortunately, was blocked and flagged as for DDoS purposes or whatever by the Tor network. We don't know much about how it works exactly, the DDoS protection in Tor, but for sure they will have something. And especially for developers who are testing a lot, and so there could be some kind of false positives that you get flagged at some point of time, that Tor network think that you are spamming the Tor network, and then your IP address get blacklisted or whatever. I researched it a few times and have not found really anything concretely, but it could be intentional that the Tor network keep this areas a little bit more secret to not make it easy for attackers to find the way around these protections. So for me, the solution was to use VPN, and then it was working again. And so that's also for some users who might have this problem. They could try either to start over with a new onion address. Unfortunately, they lose their local reputation when you do this. But yeah, that's one potential solution. I mean, the first solution is to just clean up your Tor directory, delete, or you can do it in the application, delete all the files, excluding their hidden service private key that you must not delete, of course. And sometimes this helps. On Windows, it seems there's still maybe some issues with some locked files or whatever. And the next point would be to try to start over with a new hidden service. And I've seen this also in the past. Sometimes I had problems that one hidden service didn't work. And when I created a new one, everything was fine again. And yeah, it seems that sometimes some onion addresses also get kind of like flagged or whatever, come with some problems. I don't know exactly why. And when all that doesn't work, then using VPN is probably the only last solution, or using pluggable transports in Tor, but then it's probably more related that you're living in a country where Tor is blocked, like in China or Iran or so. But I think, yeah, these Tor issues we should also put on our high priority list to get this solved, because it seems that there are a little bit too many reports. I mean, we never get everything perfect, and when there's one report every 2 months or so, I don't care really. But when there are 5 reports per month, because every user for every user who reports, we have 10 other in the silence who are not reporting, and so we should take it serious when we get repeated reports about some issues. What else? Yeah, the locking performance issue I already covered before. So we really have to take care to not use string or variable concatenation with plus. Only use the comma with the brackets syntax. And yeah, do you have anything else you want to discuss or add to the topics I covered?
Yeah, personally for me, it's great that automatic testing is moving on, because from my perspective of working on Bitcoin Chain, like every time I had to do a change, it was really scary. So if we add more unit tests or integration tests, I think it will be great.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just not trivial and a lot of effort. That's the reason why they don't exist yet. But luckily, Bernard has already done a lot of this work on the API side. So with the API, I have never looked very close to what's covered exactly and how everything works. But I think with the API, we will get already quite good coverage from integration tests, because yeah, he's covering a lot of use cases, like doing all the trade process and so on, and also many of the features which will not be enabled. Also in the API, when we release the API, we will have a program argument flag, allow or disallow experimental features. And by default, also when it's called allow experimental features, by default it's false. So a normal user who will use the API only get enabled those features which are really well tested and reviewed. And for integration tests, you need all the stuff what he has already integrated. So basically, yeah, a big scope of the BISC features, what you can do in the UI, you can do already on the API as well. But it will take much more time to get that all really production ready and reviewed and tested well. And to not be blocked too long, we basically go on with one feature after the other, starting from the most important, for basically creating offers and doing a trade, and then getting further and further to create a payment account, to make a Bitcoin transaction and so on. And yeah, for the user perspective, those features will come over time and will take a few months until the full scope will be available for users. who are not willing to take the risk to allow these experimental features. But for testing purpose, we can use this, of course, because that doesn't really matter. And yeah, maybe we have one special session where Bernard gives a little bit more overview about this integration tests, how it works, and yeah, explain it all more in detail. Regarding with the Bitcoin J, maybe I give a little bit of overview. There's a new release done now with SegWit support. So that's a huge release which took 2 years or so. So it's not very it's completely different to the latest release, to the 0.14. What we are using, so it will be a big effort for us to move over to the new release, but it's basically on our roadmap for the next few months. The current roadmap is that we get, we are using the 0.14.4 release, and then there was a little bit a newer release, the 14.7, and Oscar has updated all the code to the 14.7. So basically that should be, I think it's already a pull request, which is ready for review and merge probably for the next release now. I just didn't want to get it into that release because I wanted to keep risks and testing effort low. But probably for the next release, we will basically update to this 14.7 release, which doesn't really have a lot of changes or whatever, so not a big change for the user or whatever. But then a big task will be to really test well the Bitcoin J master release. So maybe we create our own BISC branch for this. I'm not 100% sure how to deal with it. But it would be good basically when developers would work on this, but we don't have it in master as long as we are not very confident that there are no bugs there. Bitcoin J, we don't want to be the first alpha testers who run into production bugs by going too quickly into master, and we don't need the features really. I mean, we don't hardly need SegWit at the moment. So it would be, of course, nice to have how many people request it more for political and principal reasons. And myself, of course, I'm also a big fan of SegWit, but technically we don't need it, and it's not used in the trade protocol and so on. And it will be for sure, because of many API changes, it will take some time to adopt all the BISC code for this master release, and also then to add the new possibilities with SegWit and so on. So assume that take minimum 1 month's work, and then probably another month for intensive testing and so on. So I assume maybe a realistic time scope in 2 or 3 months that we could get updated to Bitcoin J master with SegWit support. And yeah, do you have anything to add, Oscar, from that area?
Well, that one of the things that we should decide, or that we can think about, is like the adding SegWit support, meaning that you could have like a SegWit addresses. Like if you want to have also backwards compatibility, meaning that you could receive funds from wallets that cannot send to Bash 32 addresses. We should have like we should enable users to have like 2 addresses. One is the old address, and the other is the new SegWit addresses. So we should think more about that. Also discussed that with Andreas Schiblach of Bitcoin J. So that will be like a challenge when implementing Bitcoin J 15. But
I'm not sure if I understand correctly. So I didn't have planned that we are moving only or to back 32 addresses only. So basically, we should support both addresses when that you can send to classical Bitcoin addresses and to the new address format. And when you receive fund, yeah, in the UI, of course, we need to have some changes to that the user can decide. When you want the receive address, you can decide, yeah, you want a classical address or a new Bech32 address. But that, and of course, I'm not sure in the trade protocol how exactly to deal with it, because you can fund your required funds at the moment only with classical addresses and so on. So I would do it basically in steps and start only with the minimum that we support Bech32 addresses for sending and receiving, but not using it in the trade protocol, because I think it doesn't really add any big benefit technically, or I mean, it's only basically this kind of like SegWit support mentality, which is more a political thing. And I'm also not so 100% sure, and there are some people like Luke-JR who are against using Bech or SegWit transaction when you don't need it for Lightning or so, because basically they get counted in this additional block space and basically help to create bigger blocks. So when more and more people are using SegWit addresses, it leads to factually bigger blocks. I mean, of course, the block size is still the 1 megabyte, but this additional block space, which is handled differently, is in reality, of course, you need, when you're a full node, you need to download this data as well, and it costs you more resources. And for those people who are in the camp, like Luke-JR, who want even smaller blocks and are very concerned about the block size growth and resource consumption, I think they have some good arguments to try to not overuse the new address format when you don't have a real need for it. And this good intention to basically push SegWit and so might be at the end not really end in so good results when you think a little bit further in this. I have not thought and discussed much in that direction. I just found it interesting when I saw these comments from Luke-JR, because I was not aware myself earlier, and people like Nopara73 from Wasabi Wallet, who push a lot to SegWit only. I have not discussed with him, and I don't know exactly the background, but I'm a little bit skeptical if that really is such a good idea. And if basically, or if, for instance, when we can choose to use only SegWit transactions in the trade protocol or not, if it's a good idea or not, because we don't need the features from, I mean, transaction malleability is a theoretical issue in Bisq as well, but it's not a practical issue. And yeah, but that's maybe for future discussions. But I would say in the beginning, the goal is only to make it available for sending and receiving. Some people are complaining that you cannot send from Wasabi Wallet, for instance, you cannot send funds to Bisq. And the Wasabi developer were even trying to help projects who are not on SegWit yet to implement it and so on. But I think that's now obsolete because Bitcoin J is now ready, and they are not Java developers, so probably they are not really, they cannot help so much. But of course, it's great that they offer this help. Yeah, that's a little bit my point of view on this, but we can have maybe our self-discussions, or then when we get more closer to this, have more broad discussion about the strategy, how we support it and what we support, and the roadmap for that.
Okay, cool.
I'm not very familiar. With this, there's some complexity of different backward compatibility with addresses and so on. I have not really followed close, and maybe you give me a little bit of update about this before we are discussing this closer. But there's some complexity included in this topic with SegWit addresses and transactions and so on. That and I think also from the wallet side, I think there were some issues that with the HT wallet, there was some non-trivial complexities included.
Well, yeah, basically, I mean, I think most of the Bitcoin J, most of the applications that use Bitcoin J, like us, they will have to like not use the default wallet, which will just create like just SegWit addresses. We will have to like create 2 keychains inside the wallet to have both SegWit addresses and all addresses, because if we don't, we won't be able to provide users with legacy addresses, and we should be able to do that because there are still wallets that don't have SegWit implemented, and those wallets won't be able to fund this queue. So we need to be able to support both. But that's it.
So basically, you cannot use the same private key from your wallet for the legacy address and for the new address, or because probably Bitcoin J cannot handle it, and probably to separate or to merge them together when you're spending funds from a legacy address, you cannot use the private key of this address for sending it with a in a SegWit transaction, or the other way around. Also, you cannot mix it in when you have only one keychain, and you have basically for one private key. You cannot use this private key for both the legacy address and for the Bech32 address. Is this correct?
Well, the private key are not shared. What is shared is the seed words, but there are 2 derivation paths for SegWit and for non-SegWit.
Okay, so we'll have basically a similar system like with BSQ, that we have same seed word root, but we have a different branch of the HT wallet.
Exactly, yes.
And that's how well is this already supported from the Bitcoin J side? Because actually we have a few tiny issues with this concept, because it was basically Bitcoin J was not developed for multi-wallet usage. And one issue what SQ discovered, it happens basically when you send Bitcoin from your BISC wallet to a BSQ address by just removing the B, the prefix. You can do this. Then you screw up your wallet. I mean, it's not the intended and not the normal use case, so we ignore it at the moment. But it should be fixed one day, but it's not trivial to fix because it goes very deep in the architecture, how Bitcoin J is handling the wallets and sharing data. But when they have, I think Bitcoin J have to support both address formats to be able to support the legacy addresses as well, because I think that's a required use case for many wallets, at least 1 or 2 years. And when they have this requirement, I think then they have to work on this fix as well regarding this problem, but we have run into it to support basically multiple branches or multiple wallets in a better way like it is at the moment. Is this correct?
Yes, I can imagine there will be some issues when using both legacy addresses and SegWit addresses on Bitcoin J, because I kind of feel that Andreas was not so interested in that use case. So probably there are some bugs that he didn't foresee, and for instance, I'm not sure if you can spend funds that you have on SegWit addresses and non-SegWit addresses on the same transaction using the provided coin selector. So there are still some unknowns.
Yeah, so when it's the same constellation like with BSQ, we are doing this all the time, that we are creating one transaction which mix the Bitcoin wallet inputs and BSQ inputs, so that works without problem. The only problem is when you are sending from one. Actually, it's also because we can send from BSQ Bitcoin to the Bitcoin wallet, and I have not seen any issues with that so far. Also, for instance, when you make a compensation request and you get rejected, then the reserved funds, which should have become BSQ, are then dedicated Bitcoin, and in your BSQ wallet you can send this to your Bitcoin wallet, and that's basically just a transaction where you send some satoshis from your BSQ wallet to your Bitcoin wallet, and that works without problem. And the problem what SQ had was when you were sending some Bitcoin from the Bitcoin wallet to the BSQ wallet, and I'm not sure why in that direction we have the problem, in the other direction not. That's not very logical, so we have to look close into it. Maybe I shouldn't get lost too much in such details.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think that the big, I mean, the important comment is that there will be some testing before we fully use Bitcoin J15.
Yeah, I think we need very intense testing, and especially very good developer testing, that before a longer release that all the developers are using this already for locally when they're testing and so on, so that we have enough time to spot any issues. Anything else anybody want to discuss? I mean, the last topic what I wanted to cover regarding this ideas for altcoin trade improvements, maybe I postponed for another call, because it was mainly I would like to have Thomas in a call then as well, because he might be a potential developer who could work on this, and to not repeat it, and to talk directly with him might make more sense, and it's already late, it's already 1 hour. So maybe we wrap up here if you don't want to add anything. Hello, Devin, did you want to add anything? We don't hear you.
Sorry,
maybe.
I'm good.
Okay, yeah. Okay, then thanks for joining, and see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.